Each time a child was born, Rhea had to stand before the same fear again. A newborn life had done nothing wrong. It had no power, no plan, and no voice except the first small cry. Yet when Cronus saw that life, he did not see a child first. He saw the prophecy reaching toward his throne. Cronus was the king of the Titans. He had overthrown Uranus and placed himself at the center of a new order. But after he gained the throne, he did not seem free. He seemed to have entered a narrower prison. It was not a room made of stone. It was the prison of fear inside his own mind. Rhea watched all of this from beside him. When a child was born, it must have felt as if a brief light entered the house. A little breath, a warm body, a life that had just arrived in the world. But that joy could not stay. Cronus took the child into his own hands, and Rhea's hands were left empty. The prophecy did not simply make Cronus cruel. It changed the way he saw the world. A child was no longer a child. A child became a future enemy. A newborn cry was no longer the sound of life. To him, it became the sound of the throne beginning to shake. What made this harder for Rhea was that Cronus may have believed he was protecting order. He may have told himself that if the king fell, everything would fall with him. But the moment order needs to swallow life in order to survive, that order is already sick. Rhea's grief was probably quiet. Myth does not remember her mainly as someone who screams against the palace walls. It remembers the moment when she finds another way. There are times when tears change nothing. When pain is shown and power still listens only to its own fear, grief begins to think. Rhea could not defeat Cronus face to face. The Titan King was strong, and his fear had hardened into something almost like law. So her struggle could not be a simple collision of force against force. The path left to her was quieter, more dangerous and more exact. It was deception. In myth, deception is not always only evil. Sometimes it is the last wisdom of someone who cannot survive by meeting power in the open. Rhea did not make a plan because she loved lies. She made a plan because if she gave the truth to Cronus unchanged, another life would vanish. The one she turned toward was Gaia, her mother. The earth had remembered the suffering of this family for a long time. When Uranus had hidden his children away, Gaia had not only endured, she had searched for a way to cut through the order that pressed them down. So when Rhea goes to Gaia, she is not merely asking for help. She is stepping into an older memory of motherhood. Uranus had feared his children and buried them. Cronus had feared his children and swallowed them. The form had changed, but the wound had crossed from one generation into the next. Gaia and Uranus gave Rhea a way forward. When the child was born, she must not hand the child to Cronus. She must wrap a stone in cloth and give that to him instead. The real child had to be hidden far away, beyond the reach of the frightened king. The plan did not require an army. It did not require a shining weapon. It required a mother who could hold herself steady at the most dangerous moment. It required quiet hands, a covered stone, and the courage to let no tremor in her face betray the truth. The child Rhea carried had not yet entered the world, but the struggle around him had already begun. On one side stood Cronus, holding tightly to the throne because he feared the future. On the other side stood Rhea, holding tightly to life because she could not accept another disappearance. Perhaps Rhea placed her hand on her belly at night and felt the child move. Perhaps in that silence she promised herself that this one would not be taken. This was not the grand courage of a warrior on a battlefield. It was the hidden courage of a mother thinking in the dark. That is why this scene is powerful. Rhea is not strong because she feels no fear. She is strong because she must have been afraid and still moved. If the plan failed, the child would be lost, and she would have to face Cronus's rage. But if she did nothing, the ending was already decided. Sometimes people do not act because fear has disappeared. They act because fear has become smaller than the cost of staying still. Rhea's last plan begins in that place. It begins when grief can no longer remain only grief, and when love becomes precise enough to deceive power. The trick itself looks small. A stone wrapped like a child. A true child sent away into hiding. A king so blinded by fear that he does not look carefully at what he is given. But myth often lets the future turn on something small enough to fit inside two hands. The stone is a strange and sorrowful object. It is cold and silent, yet for one dangerous moment, it must stand in the place of a living child. It carries the tragedy of this house in miniature. A father is so afraid that he cannot recognize life, and a mother must disguise stone as life in order to save her son. There are tears inside this plan, but there is also cold judgment. Rhea knows that crying alone will not protect the child. Yet becoming clear-minded does not mean she has stopped suffering. Her sorrow has become action. Pain, after sitting too long in the heart, can sometimes become an almost exact kind of wisdom. At the center of the story is a child who has not yet been born. But the hero of this moment is Rhea. She has no throne in the story, and she does not command an army. Still, she holds on to the narrow space where the future has not completely closed. Greek myth often shows how power becomes trapped by fear, but it also shows that the answer to fear is not always a greater violence. Rhea's strength is not a blade. It is concealment. It is not a shout. It is silence. It is not open rebellion, but one exchange made so carefully that the king does not notice until history has already changed direction. When Rhea carries this last plan, the order of Cronus still appears untouched. The throne still stands. The palace still feels heavy. The shadow of prophecy has not gone away. But somewhere beneath the visible world, the first crack has opened. An order built on swallowing children is about to be fooled by a mother who refuses to forget them. Rhea's tears do not end as weakness. They become memory, judgment, and finally a plan. She cannot erase the pain, but she can refuse to let pain decide everything. So this moment is more than a preparation for Zeus's birth. It is the first quiet path by which life learns how to escape the fear that tried to rule it.